Describe in one word how you feel when your class discusses politics.
Tense.
Angry.
Uneasy.
Worried.
A lot of the times, I just feel very frustrated.
Sort of out of touch, I guess. Or maybe kind of just silent, I guess.
Explain why.
Because I feel like people talk about things they don't know about, and they just like spout back what they've heard, and they're not really like analytical at all.
Yeah.
Only because I'm a very inclusive person when it comes to politics, and I want to understand everybody's political views. However, I feel like there's always at least one or two people in all of my classes that tend to just overshadow everybody else, and so that is always something that is on my mind, is everybody's voice and everybody's opinion being heard, even if it is sort of against the norm or the unpopular opinion.
There are more kids who share the same beliefs, so it kind of ends up being a really cyclical discussion where really nothing new is introduced, and it's more just kind of collective frustration and kind of complaining. But like a lot of times it's just a lot of people sharing all of the bad things that are happening in the world, and there aren't really many people offering solutions.
Sometimes I feel really worried that people are going to say things that are mean or problematic, and not only for the sake of people who are going to be offended by those things, myself included, but also for the fact of how everyone's going to pounce on them as well.
I am a fairly liberal person on most social issues, on economic issues. I'm left of center.
Probably like really liberal or like Democrat, because I am. I don't know, because that's like what most closely like represents what I believe. I might even be like sort of socialist, but yeah.
I'm probably right in the middle. Why? I'm progressive in a lot of ways, but also conservative in a lot of ways. So
I would say that I'm liberal. I was raised that way, and as I've grown up and kind of come into my own mind and my own way of thinking, that's still like the beliefs and values that I believe in and that I think are important.
Left.
Okay.
Pretty solidly left.
Democrat.
I would identify myself as more left-wing or liberal. I find that it really matches up with my moral views a bit more as far as things like feminism, LGBT rights, sort of et cetera, et cetera.
I would identify as a Republican, just because what their stance is on some issues align more with how I feel about it.
I'd say I'm pretty liberal, definitely. Maybe a bit more moderate than some people here.
I'd say that most people at Cleveland are definitely pretty liberal. I've definitely heard some more conservative views, but I would say that they're pretty few and far between.
I want to say that they're all like pretty liberal socially, but like we don't really talk about economics, so like I don't know how people feel about that, but I would say that we're all like pretty democratic for the most part.
I think that most people at Cleveland, their parents are Democrats and they were raised that way as well, and that's the belief system that they have.
Amongst staff members, very comfortable. Amongst students, relatively comfortable. I'm in a position of authority, I'm in a position of power, and I don't necessarily want people to feel uncomfortable about certain political things. In past years, I have not told students how I was going to vote in a presidential election until the election. That did not happen this year. I made it very clear that I thought that most of what Mr. Trump was standing for was reprehensible to my viewpoints.
I feel very comfortable voicing my political opinion at school because I feel like it does match up with the majority of people. I would say that I am in the norm with my political views. However, I can recognize that if I was a more conservative student, I may not feel as comfortable voicing my political views.
Not very. Whenever my classes get into discussions, I tend just to sit back and watch because I know I am definitely in the minority of the opinion, so I know that saying something would just cause more of an argument than anything.
I feel very comfortable. I definitely believe that most people at my school agree with me, at least mostly. And I think that a lot of the things that I do say when I choose to speak are things that are important and that everyone should believe for the sake of others.
I feel somewhat comfortable. My mom and sister are more on the liberal side. My father's side is more on the Republican side of the family, so I feel like I can talk to my dad about it, but I just tend to just stay out of it, honestly.
I feel really comfortable. I think my parents and my brother and my family really understand things and they think a bit more similar, and I know that they won't judge me for anything I say.
It's actually made me more comfortable. It's made me want to be even louder about it because I just want to kind of put an FU to Trump supporters.
I would definitely say it's made me less comfortable. I definitely do not side with a lot of things he's said, and I think that it's sort of been given Republicans a bad name. I think that expressing my view, my opinions as a Republican has really sort of made me a target to some people because they think I side with everything that a Republican would say or everything a Republican would do. So I think that most Republicans are misrepresented.
I would say it's almost felt like now that Donald Trump has been elected, I have more of an obligation to voice my political opinion. I would say that I've become more vocal politically. I don't think it's changed necessarily the comfort level, because I've always felt fairly comfortable voicing my political opinion, but I think it has increased how often I do speak out about political issues.
I think that it's made me feel even more comfortable than I was before because I think that with a candidate who had so much hate for people, I think that it just made me feel like it was more important to express what I believe and what I think is right and to just let people know that not everyone believes those things.
I think it's become a lot more polarized. I think people feel really angry, and so we were part of a lot of protests, and I noticed that vandalism really picked up right after the election, and I think it's because people were feeling really frustrated and out of control. And I think that there's been a lot more fights too, especially between the black and white kids at our school, and I think that's kind of like a echo of the election.
I would say that the school has become a lot more vocal. Its students have become a lot more vocal. It's become a much more political place, as I think honestly much of America has. I wouldn't say that it's changed and made people who might feel like they agree more with Donald Trump's political views feel more comfortable to speak out. I don't think I've heard any real increase of sort of the hateful rhetoric that's been going on with Trump especially. In fact, it might have done the exact opposite, as sort of more liberal political students feel the need to speak out and speak out more often. It quite possibly has pushed more conservative or more Trump-aligned people farther away from speaking their position.
I think that it's made anyone who identifies slightly as conservative, as a bigot, as a racist, as a homophobic person, I think that it's definitely done injustice to a lot of students here. We've had a Republican student union, but the teachers and administration have asked us not to meet because they think that we are going to basically just cause more of a problem, and they just think it's best if we don't even try.
But I think schools is a place where we can come together and discuss. We're trying to teach civil discourse here, and I think regardless of how we feel, I think at the end of the day we can come together and at least have some kind of understanding of where we're all coming from.
I want to say all of them. I feel like it's probably not really appropriate for them to say exactly who they support, but I think that given this election, and given everything that it's like bigger than presidency, like it's about like human rights and civil rights and stuff like that, I think that it is kind of appropriate for teachers to say like, no, I don't stand for racism, to say like, no, you're safe here, no, I don't think that this is how we should be running our country. I think that that is appropriate and necessary for the students at the school to feel safe.
I think I can say 100% of my teachers have expressed their opinion. I think that this election has really made people want to speak their mind, and in this school I don't think there's really any repercussions for teachers expressing or even forcing their political views. I've definitely had a lot of teachers bash on Republicans in class, and while I think that is completely not right and it's very wrong for a teacher to do that, the school allows it, so I can't really say much about it.
I would say few. I think that mostly the classes where I have heard teachers talk about political opinions are where it is more directly relevant, like history class. I have heard teachers, at least implicitly, express their political views because it's kind of hard to get rid of bias. I think it really depends on the situation that you're in. Again, it depends on the class, very much so. Like, if I'm in calculus and all of a sudden my teacher moves from, talking about integrals to talking about, how much they hate or love Donald Trump, like that's not really appropriate. But I would say that bias is important to recognize, and if that means just coming out and saying your political views, if you're talking with students about a political issue in order to recognize your bias, then so be it, as long as the teacher is not expressing their political views with the intent to sort of force them upon the students. I do think it is appropriate.
I used to think no, but I think that I am starting to think that it's more okay, especially since Trump. I think it's important for teachers to express to students that, especially like marginalized groups of people that Trump has said terrible things about, that those people are valued and safe in our community. And I think one way that teachers do that is by expressing their beliefs about Trump as a person.
I try not to, although this year was the first year that I did do that. I've been teaching a long time, but it was with the Trump election, and I kind of justified it by saying that it was some of those the conversations that have been taped, like the really, misogynistic, talking about assaulting women stuff, that it was like that kind of language would not fly in a classroom according to PPS policy. But I really don't feel that it's my place to share my politics with the students. It doesn't really have a bearing on the class.
I think it kind of maybe depends. So, for example, last Friday there was the stabbing on the MAX train. And on my personal Facebook page, before I knew anything about who the perpetrator was, I made a comment that, well, they captured the guy alive. I'm 99% sure he was white. And I've made that comment in class. And the comment is based on if you can de-escalate and diffuse a situation with a guy who was waving a knife around, if you can do that to a white person, how come we can't do that at the same rate with African Americans? So I wasn't hiding my opinions on that. Now, if you call that a political opinion or a social opinion, I think it's a political opinion. And maybe as a white male, maybe it's easier for me to do that. Right? There is white privilege, there is male privilege, and maybe it's easier for me to say that I think that's a pretty obvious double standard. I don't think the double standard should exist. And by the way, I'm not saying that the police should have killed the guy. I just think they should be consistent in their de-escalation techniques.
Well, I think, we all have to come at it from a place of respect for each other's opinion. I think that's important to set that up right from the start?
I think that it's always good to have people start by figuring out where they are on an issue and defining what their beliefs are and what their values are. And then really the best possible situation is having students talk between themselves where they're having the conversation and I might only just be giving a couple pointers here and there or kind of challenging them to challenge their own preconceived ideas and what their politics are.
Was there anything that resonated with you? Is there something that made you feel uncomfortable? Is there something that made you feel unsafe? I think asking questions like that is good.
I think they do have a huge impact, and I think that's the reason why teachers need to be careful about how they present things, because I think a teacher could say things and the students are disinclined to naturally believe what their teacher says.
There's certainly nothing wrong with a teacher expressing his or her opinion. In my opinion, I think that helps promote growth in students.
If you have political posters in your room, other than you have a very holistic, welcoming personality. A sign outside my door, and we did them the day after the election or 2 days after the election. All students are welcome here. That is a political statement, but it's a political statement that's really easy to make because we're teachers and we want our students to feel safe and welcomed in here. But I do realize the catch-22 of, we live in a very, this is a very pro-choice, very liberal area, and what if one teacher's idea of doing a social justice curriculum unit was on, a right-to-life issue? And that has happened that happened with a teacher at Benson who got into trouble for, there were a couple things that he got into trouble for, but one of them was like advocating a certain position. Well, there's plenty of teachers who advocate social justice positions. So at that point is, how do you define social justice? Most left-wing people know how to do social justice, but can that also include things that are socially conservative?